on or off?
No, Dennis. We need to see your lovely face.
All right, all right. I'll keep my camera on. Hello to everyone who's here. Dennis Williams, Jr., financial advisor. The company that I work for and that I'm a part owner in is called Farther Finance. We are a registered investment advisor. We are considered a fiduciary. So if anybody has questions about that, we can talk about that a little later. But essentially, we are required to put our clients' needs above our own. But that, and along with clients would be our community as well. So I'm a big proponent of financial education. One of my missions in life is to democratize financial literacy. So last time we met, we didn't talk about the financial planning process, or we didn't get into kind of the nuts and bolts behind investing, risk tolerance, constructing a portfolio, all those kind of things. But that's what we're going to get into today. So I want to start off with a question. So for anybody who's on the call today, we have the chat. Hopefully everyone knows you can access the chat right on the bottom of the screen. But I was just curious, on a scale of 1 to 10, if everyone could just type in where they think they lie on that continuum from 1 being, not knowing anything from a personal finance perspective, or 10 being they know everything. They're a financial advisor. They could teach this class kind of thing. So I'm just curious, and there's no judgment, but I just want to make sure that I am speaking, in line with what people need to know. So I'll give 30 seconds to kind of see what comes through there.
And Dennis, do you mind repeating the question? We just had someone else join us.
Sure. In the chat, if you just put on a scale of 1 to 10, just your level of personal finance proficiency. So, do you feel really comfortable with personal finance and all the different terminology and ways to position assets? Or do you just need all the help you can get? So if that's the case, you can, put 1, 2, or whatever you want. If you could teach a class, put a 10.
All right. So we have in the chat 4 from Simone, 4.5 from Cece. Ruby put 2, and Paul put -1. Yeah, right, Paul.
Yeah, I know Paul. I know Paul well enough to know that I don't know if I believe that answer.
Right.
Okay, let's see. So we got some answers, so we kind of have an idea of where to start. So I'm going to pull up this presentation. So one of the things I want to give a caveat, this presentation is one that I used. Wow, it's on both screens. Can you see the presentation or no?
No. Did you hit the share screen?
I cannot see it.
I thought I did. Let me learn how to use technology. Displays. Use slideshow. Okay, here it's coming. Bear with me. Share screen. You should be able to see it right now.
Here we go. Yes.
Okay, but I want to make sure. I want to make it full screen. So one of the things I was going to say is this presentation, this was from a previous company that I was with. I was not able to, we're actually going through rebranding our company right now. So it doesn't actually look like the branding of my company if you were to look up our website. So it's not the most attractive, but the point, we will get the point across. So financial planning. So we talk about financial planning. It can be a very complicated topic. And one of the reasons it can be complicated is because our industry, again, I have my own theories behind this, but our industry uses multiple ways to describe similar things. They talk about things that could be simplified in nature, and they make it complex. So we're going to try to get to the basics of financial planning. If these are things that you already know, let me know. We can move on to other topics. But essentially, we're going to talk about what does it look like at its core, but what are the components of financial planning, and how do you do it in a way that's effective for you and your family? Because that's really what matters. And we don't need to overcomplicate it if it doesn't make sense or doesn't help. So, can you still see my screen? Can you still see the presentation?
No, it went away.
No, we can't.
So I have two screens right now, and every once in a while my screen likes to.
You see it now.
It likes to have a mind of its own. But anyway, so here is.
If you wanted to go full screen, yeah, click on that right there. There you go.
Yeah, I used to have it on two screens, but I turned the other screen off, so now we can see the presentation. But anyways, when you guys see this woman on the front of the presentation, what do you think of?
Freedom.
She's
I
in
am
some sort of
free.
solace.
Yeah.
It's praying.
You say again?
She's praying.
I don't,
Praying.
Praying.
She's at ease. You
I have
know?
to-
Yeah.
I have to say, I don't think of money when I see her.
You don't?
No, I don't think of, I mean, it looks like freedom, but it doesn't make me think of finances. She looks free and happy and relieved about something. She's beautiful.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, that's so this is actually an image that I used on another thing related to my day job, to financial advising. But when I saw this picture and I saw her, like if we do this right, if we do the financial planning process right, you should feel at ease, you should feel relieved, you should feel at peace. And that's kind of what we want to do for everybody. So when you look at the planning process, we're going to talk about obviously planning, financial planning. We get into actually the balance sheet and budget and spreadsheet, who you are from a numbers perspective. We're going to look at the pyramid from a risk perspective, the financial planning process, concepts, misconceptions. So one of the things that you guys have all heard different versions of this, but proper planning prevents poor performance. So there's other ways to say it which aren't PC or whatever. But that's the thing. If we plan early, then we can avoid some mistakes that might come down the road. So one of the statistics that I thought was pretty shocking was that 75%, and again, I can go the other way, but 75% of Americans have no documented financial plan. I'm not going to ask people to put in the chat, do you or don't you? But that's just a statistic that's been that was revealed from, I think it was from the Federal Reserve. But most people don't manage their money with a plan in mind. So if you don't have a plan and things come up that are unexpected, how do you deal with those things? So if you hear nothing, like kind of like Pastor Braxton says, if you hear nothing else about this sermon, hear this: planning is very, very important. So the process of meeting financial goals through proper management of your finances. So there's so many goals that we'll have in our lives. There's goals that you see here, examples of them, but there are so many other goals that are not here that we all have in common, that we all want to achieve at some point in our lives. So buying a home. And actually, when I say buying a house, I want to, one of the first things I'll mention is that buying a house isn't as important to me as it used to be. Now that I've seen many different ways in which to deal with living, finances, renting versus buying. To me, like that first goal of buying a house should be framed around your lifestyle. Like, do you want flexibility in where you are and where you locate, or do you want you want to stay in this specific part of the country and you're never going to go anywhere? That might be a little different. So, buying a home, retirement is one we all care about. But again, I'll change the word retirement into freedom. Or work optional is what I talk to a lot of clients about. The day that that you can tell whoever you work for that I don't have to come back tomorrow if I don't want to, kind of thing. So retirement is different for everybody. Maybe retirement is going off and you starting your own business or becoming a consultant or just doing whatever you want to do with your time. And then on the opposite end of that spectrum, emergency funds. So I was talking with a client today and we were going over, and I'll show you guys a spreadsheet that I use for everyone that I work with. And it has a bunch of formulas in it, but it helps populate what an emergency fund should be based off of your expenses. So we'll get to that in future slides. Financial legacy is also something that is very important because we all want to be financially well off. We all want to have freedom with what we do with our time, and a lot of that comes with if we have enough money to support that. But what happens when all those things are taken care of? Who do we want to impact when we're gone? And obviously, that's some people have families, some people have causes. Like a lot of you know about my son was we had a pretty amazing experience at Seattle Children's. I know for a fact part of my legacy is going to be impacting Seattle Children's Hospital, so other families can also benefit the way that we have. Higher education is another goal. Sometimes you have to save for that. So we look at the financial planning pyramid. So we have wealth protection, we have wealth creation, and then we have distribution. So when we talk about protection, I'll put myself as an example. The wealth protection could be something to the effect of, I have 2 kids, I'm married, I have a certain level of income. If something were to happen to me tomorrow, what happens to the people that I leave behind? How do I protect the wealth that we've created? Because hypothetically, I could have investments and actually we have already lived through this once because, you have an emergency in your family, somebody gets sick, they go to the hospital, all of a sudden everything that you saved is gone within a period of a year. So those kind of things happen. That's happened to me. So I can speak from it personally, then we have to build back up. But what happens if I were to pass away? How do I protect the wealth for my family and make sure that they're okay going forward? So protection, obviously creation, we're also, some of these goals we have to do simultaneously. And creation and protection is one of those things where you kind of do have to do at the same time, depending upon your stage in life. So creation, how many people here have, have retirement plans, have a 401k, 403b, an IRA or a Roth IRA, or just investments in general, we can call those non-qualified accounts, which are accounts that are not specifically retirement related. But essentially, when you look at, when I see wealth creation, the first thing I think of is inflation. Do we all have a good understanding with what inflation means to you? Not to the world, not to a textbook, but to you. Does anyone want to give their definition of inflation? Because there is no wrong answer to this, by the way. Does anyone want to give a definition?
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, for me, inflation is that everything costs more, but your income doesn't increase. Like the gas prices, right? Gas has gone through the roof, $5 a gallon, but my income didn't go up at all. So, but I'm still gonna pay. So to me, that's inflation.
That is 100% correct.
Thank you.
That's perfect. Are there any other examples of what inflation means? Because basically what Paul just said, there's variations of that answer. But yeah, that's inflation to me too. It's hurting, man. Gas is expensive.
But it's not just gas, it's all kinds of other things. There's been increases in prices all over that, like Paul said, I didn't get a raise.
Right. Yep, that's very true. How about things like for those who have kids, like I'm thinking about, we have some tools that allow us to project out what college is going to cost when my 11-year-old is 18, 7 years, or my 6-year-old when he's 18 and 12 years. But it's kind of scary to think if they don't get some sort of scholarship or some sort of assistance from the school, and I have to pay for that all myself, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Whenever I talk to my dad or my mom, and when they went to school, it was a quarter of that. So that's another example of inflation. But essentially, this wealth creation, if we're not keeping up with inflation and how the costs of life change, costs in life change, then we're not going to be able to afford to live the way we want in retirement. One of the things that we talk about when we talk about how much do we need to save for retirement, one of the things we need to figure out is what kind of lifestyle do you want in retirement? And we look at your current income, and we usually base it off of 80% to 120% of whatever your current income is. So you guys can all think about that separately. This is how much I make today. So essentially, for me to be able to retire the way I want, I'm going to have to save enough money where I can on a yearly basis take $100,000 a year, so the way I currently live. So that's the whole wealth creation. And then distribution, of course, is the flip side of that. When you get to the goal of retirement and you saved X amount of dollars, how do you distribute the wealth that you've created in a way that's sustainable? Because if you don't want to get to, especially with people living longer, you don't want to get to age 80 and all of a sudden you only plan to pay for living expenses through age 79 or something like that. And all of a sudden it's a problem as far as being able to afford life. Come on. There we go. So this is kind of an example, again, rough sketch of a financial planning process. I call it something different now. So when it says meet, plan, implement, and review, so the top left where it says data collection. So if I were to meet with anyone and kind of go through the financial planning process, the first thing I want to do when we meet is I want to go through a discovery process. I want to know what's important to you. I want to know the goals that you care about. I want to know where you currently stand from a financial preparedness standpoint, from a literacy standpoint. I want to make sure that we're talking the same language. But again, it's just collecting data and just listening, making sure that we understand we're on the same page. So when you're doing this for yourself, again, it's important that you have all the data that you need to be able to set a foundation for where you're starting, and then know where you want to get in terms of from a goal perspective. So the next part where it says plan, I actually refer to that as reflect. So again, once we collect all the data, once we understand the goals, then the next part to me that I've noticed has been really impactful for people is we have to reflect on the data. So when I deal with clients, everyone that I work with, I look at them almost as if I were to look at Nike, or if I were to look at Microsoft or Amazon. When you look at the very basics of any large, company or stock, you have a system of income, you have a system of expenses or income and outflow. And essentially, for that to be a healthy organization, the relationship between inflows and outflows has to be positive. So when we look at the data of who each one of you are, we have to make sure that, your balance sheet, who you are, if I were to look at you as the company of, Jasmine Incorporated, like if I were to look at Jasmine and we were looking to the data of who she is, we got to make sure, is it something that's functioning properly? Because we can tweak things to improve or identify areas that we need to address. So of course, the next part, once we kind of discover, we kind of go through, we meet, data collect, we kind of have a plan, so to speak, of where we want to go based off the data. Then we kind of create that plan in the second stage, and then it goes through a review process, which we come back to you and kind of implement a process or a plan based off of the things you care about and the actual numbers. And of course, the last step is always review and make sure that things are relevant. Because one thing I do know, and again, if you can ask any person in finance this, one thing I do know for a fact is the moment that we make a plan for you, it's all wrong. And the reason for that is because you change faster than the plan cannot really keep up with you. So be monitoring and reviewing the plan because you're gonna change on a daily basis, on a yearly basis. Okay. Move this over. So cash flow analysis. So that so in the first section, actually this would be the second section. When we look at cash flow analysis, when we look at current asset allocation and net worth, these are things that would happen in the second stage of when you're looking at your financial planning process. Risk profiling, emergency fund analysis, protection, investment planning for goals, estate planning. These are all things that would happen in the first two parts when you're kind of looking at your overall financial plan and kind of understanding where you are versus where you want to be. One of the things I'll really call out here is H, and sorry for the formatting here. These things should all be on the other side of the page. I don't know what happened there, but tax planning is huge. I will ask this question for the group. How many people in this group currently have a Roth IRA? Or a Roth 401k or 403b. And this is not like, this is kind of it's just a matter of fact thing. You either do, but I'm kind of curious.
Dennis, whatever you set me up with, I have. We have in the chat, let me see here, no from Simone. Ruby put, I do. Cece said, I do have an IRA. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And GLM Consulting, yes. Lisa put through the employer, question mark.
So yeah, you could through the employer have if your employer offers a 401k, some employers have constructed the 401k in a way where you can have a Roth version. You can have a Roth 401k. So if you have one of those, you know, that's also a pretty good way to save and diversify from a tax perspective. So yeah, either it could be so IRA stands up for individual retirement account. So either you can have your own individual IRA that's Roth in nature, or you can have a 401k or 403b version of that. So for those of you who have an IRA that's a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, I'd say that makes me happy, you know. For those of you that don't, now, as of right now, you have another tool in your tool belt that's going to allow you to, because a lot of times everybody has heard the word diversify. You know, we want to diversify risk. We want to diversify investments. We want to diversify our time, all these different ways to diversify. But if you're not diversifying how you are approaching taxes, you're going to let me not say you're going to regret it, because I guess you can't regret something that you are not aware of, but you're missing out on a big tool later on down the line. So let's just put it this way. I'll use a real life example. I had a client who she had her and her sister, they go on vacations she's currently retired. This client I've had for like 10 years. She was looking to go on a vacation with her family the end of last year. And one of the things that we had noticed when we looked through the taxable implications of her current income was that if she had taken the additional $10,000 she needed from her regular IRA or her 401k, if she had taken it from there for the income she needed to go on vacation with her family, it would have bumped her into the next tax bracket. So good thing we looked at that before she just went ahead and took it, because luckily she had a Roth IRA, which she took the money from the Roth IRA, which is not taxed. You know, it can grow over, however many years you have it, and the growth is not taxed because you've already been taxed on the principal. So she took the $10,000 from her Roth IRA, didn't affect her taxable income at all. Everyone's happy. She's able to go on the trip. She's not going to get taxed excessively. And again, that's the way that she diversified from a tax perspective years, 5-6 years before she ever even thought about taking this trip. So lots of different things. This is when, financial planning can get kind of complex sometimes. Let's see. So cash flow analysis, sources of cash, uses of cash, change in balance. So this is a very simple way to look at cash flow analysis. But again, at the end of the day, when you're talking about financial planning, you got to look at what's coming in, what you're using it for. One of the things I help clients with a lot, and actually I'll share this really quickly. Jasmine, have you seen this?
Let me see. I don't think so.
Okay. Well, we need to change that immediately because I have one for you.
Oh, okay.
But essentially, this financial inventory, what this does is I did this for a client a long time ago. And again, I'm happy. I will share this with anyone, whether you're a client of mine or not. It doesn't matter. That's not the point of us being here. The point is for me if I can provide you with any kind of tools to make your life easier, I'm here to do that. So you can reach out to us after this meeting or during it and just say, hey, I want that spreadsheet, and I'll send it. Or I'll get it to Jasmine and she can send it, whatever makes sense. But what I do here is all these other tabs. And for instance, there's other tabs that I put into some of these spreadsheets that have investments, that have other data that flows in. But essentially, I want one page that clients can look at and see really, just real quick, what are my total assets? What's my net worth? What are my total expenses? How much do I have in retirement dollars? So I guess I could, I don't want to, I'm not going to show obviously a client that's already filled out for privacy reasons. But essentially all the clients have to worry about, we kind of go through these two tabs, assets and liabilities, and we go through income and expenses. And again, things like percent of net income. I want to make sure that whatever your expenses are, I want to make sure that they are below, ideally below 50% of your net income. And of course, there's already formulas built in here. So for instance, if I put, $5,000, and my income is $4,000, you can see right here that my expenses are 141% of my income. That's not going to work. It's not going to be something that can be sustainable long term. We also talk about things like emergency funds, formulas built in for based off of expenses, what they should be. And of course, on the back page here, there's recommendations based off the information you put in the other tabs. So this is just a way to make sense of everything that you're doing from a financial perspective. And like I said, if anybody wants this, let me know. We can send it to you, or I can go through it with you. That's my pleasure. Let's
Have in
see.
the chat here from, let us know your name, but I have it under as Galaxy S10. Do I need to report income as income if I share my house with someone who will pay to rent a room?
Do I need to share my income? Say that again? I'm sorry.
Do I need to report as income if I share my house with someone who will pay to rent a room?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say that you don't necessarily have to, but if you want to get the benefits of using your home as because essentially that's a business. If you want to use the home as a business and get the write-offs associated with, I don't know, depreciation or tax advantages for renting off a part of your home, then you would essentially set up an LLC, or you'd set up some sort of entity that you would be able to accept those cash flows through a business. But if you just had someone living in your house, in your room, and you weren't reporting that, then I guess they could hypothetically just give you cash. But again, if the IRS were to find out about that, that could cause some issues. So if you're claiming that as part of your overall income for the year, then honestly, here's what I'll say: consult a CPA. And I have CPAs that I can refer you to, but I'm pretty sure they would say, set up a business. If this is something that there's a lease agreement and you're getting cash on a monthly basis over a long period of time, probably the most, unless it's like you're a family member, you're just doing a favor for a short period of time, that's different. But if there's a long-term arrangement, I would probably set up a business entity to accept the flow of cash through. Okay. Assets, liabilities equals net worth. We already know that.
Lisa put in the chat, how is it income if it's designated for the mortgage?
Because is it coming? I mean, is this person part of your family? Is it part of, like for instance, I'm not gonna, like me and my wife, I wouldn't count her income. It's one family, one going towards the same household or underneath the same household. But this is somebody who's not part of your household giving you money. Because essentially it's considered rent. If you're renting a room, if it's a rental arrangement, that's when it's considered income. So if you guys, you can frame it however you want. If the person living in your house, if they're just giving you rent, or just helping you, they're supplementing and paying for part of the mortgage as an arrangement for them living there. Again, I would say consult a CPA, but I think that you could probably, I'd have to understand a little bit more about the arrangement, who the person is, to really kind of give an idea of what to do there. But I still would say consult a CPA. And I have a great one, by the way. Let's see. Uncle Sam wants you to show that income on your exactly. So that, yeah, Simone said pretty much what I was thinking. So asset allocation. So of course any other questions, let me know in the chat. We can talk about whatever's on your mind. But asset allocation analysis. So when you look at the continuum of risk, and I believe on the next page, it kind of shows this in more detail. Let's see. So there we go. So keep in mind, see this continuum of risk from low to no risk, being risk averse, and then aggressive on the other side. If I go back to these different investments, so you have a lot of different investments that you could use as far as asset allocation. So obviously cash, I would probably start with cash being the most conservative thing you could possibly use as an investment. You have, and again, if I was using a whiteboard, if I were to look at any one of these assets, you could do a continuum of conservative to aggressive, within each one of these asset classes in and of itself, because you're going to have areas within the cash portion of the investment landscape, which are more risky than, say, a savings account at Washington, US Bank or something like that. Bonds, same thing. Every bond that you have has a credit rating, has a risk and a credit rating. So a AAA rated bond versus a BB rated bond are going to have completely different risk parameters, as well as interest payments based on the level of risk associated with that particular bond. Like if I were to issue a bond today, I would have a really, really low credit rating. I would have to pay a really, really high rate of interest because of the risk of default. And that's basically what the ratings behind bonds are. With stocks, of course, there is no risk rating. But again, when you put money into a stock, whatever you put into that stock hypothetically could go to zero. The sky is also the limits on the upside, but you could also lose money as well. So there's different continuums of risk there. Real estate, gold, similar kind of characteristics. So there are many ways to position, and it's funny. This presentation here was done a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Now we have other things. We have cryptocurrency, we have NFTs, we have all these different kinds of hybrids of investments that are now becoming more popular.
I'm sorry, may I ask a question, please?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Can we go back to bonds? So there's AAA bonds and BB bonds, and you said high rate of interest. So the AAA bonds, if I'm not understanding right, you buy it, you don't touch it for whatever, and it matures, correct? But you have to, and if you do use it, or if you do try to spend it during that time, there's a high tax on it. Is that correct? Or am I saying that right?
Yeah, if you look at a bond, so a bond essentially is, when you think about a bond, it's nothing but a loan, which you kind of already said. So when you look at, let's just say, Dennis Corporation, I have a bond. Whatever the rating on the bond is, if it's a highly rated bond, and I'll just use the US government as an example, highest rated bonds, one of the highest rated bonds you can get. There's never been a default ever. So the likelihood of you getting your money back justifies them not having to pay you a lot in terms of an interest rate or a yield on the bond. So like the 10-year bond is paying right around, what is it, like 2.8 now or something like that, 2.85 or something. So let's say if we compare the 10-year US Treasury bond with the government to a bond coming from me, I have a very low rating compared to the US government. So I'd have to pay a lot higher of an interest rate to entice people to lend me money. But just like you said, if it's a 10-year bond, you get, so you're loaning me $1,000. So bonds are usually allocated in $1,000 increments, unless you're buying a fund of bonds. But I'll just use one bond as an example. $1,000 bond. If it's from me, I have to pay you 10%. So every single year that I am holding that money of yours, whether it's $1,000 or $100,000, I'm paying you 10%, a 10% coupon payment. Usually those things are, I hate to get complicated, but typically bonds are paid semi-annually. Everyone is kind of unique, but if it's a 10% coupon, they'll pay you 5% every 6 months, 5% the other 6 months. And every single year they'll do that. So for the whole year, you'll get 10% every single year. And at the end of that 10-year period, then I give you your money that you lent me back as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. That's I want to make sure that we're talking about the things that are on your mind. So I appreciate that. Was that explained well enough?
Yes, sorry, I had to take myself off mute. Yes.
Quick question here. Dennis, you briefly touched on cryptocurrencies. I definitely know it's one of those things where if you got in early back in the day, like 10 years ago, then that was definitely the good time, right? When there was a lot of uncertainty about it, nobody knew about it. But now we've hit a different period of time where not only Bitcoin and other cryptos are suffering, but also the NFTs and those other digital currencies that have popped up have not been kind of what they've been propped up to be. So kind of what is your stance on that, on those cryptocurrencies, digital currencies right now?
Ooh, that's a great question. You know, I own very little cryptocurrency, just because it's like, you know, if I were to look at a complete portfolio, what used to be, if you look at kind of a pyramid in terms of saying, you know, the foundation could be your cash and emergency funds, and then you might have bonds, and then you might have stocks and equities. Now, to me, there should be a little bit of an allocation on the top of that pyramid, you know, like I said, at the furthest part of whatever your risk profile is, whether that be 1 to 5% of your portfolio, you know, if you're okay with it, should be allocated toward these new investments called cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is something that I believe has a utility, makes a lot of sense. You know, the blockchain is something that you can actually verify transactions between people, businesses, entities, whatever it may be. There's an actual use case for it. So I don't think that it's going to go anywhere. I think that it's here to stay, and it's going to become more widely adopted every single year. So, you know, I'm of course, like you said, there's so many cryptocurrencies, and and I actually heard literally, this was a month ago, a personal connection that I know knew someone in California who was coming up with, and you can actually look it up. I think it's called the Elon coin, or Elon, it's like the Elon Musk token or something like that. But I think there was an article about it on CNBC. But essentially, these folks in LA, they were going to create this token. They were going to pump it up by getting a lot of, you know, publicity and kind of momentum behind the name, just so the price could spike and they could take their money out and everybody else be left with the bag, so to speak. So that's kind of, so there are some negative parts of this cryptocurrency landscape, some things that have really no use, no real utility. And they're basically like kind of like Dogecoin. Everybody's probably heard of Dogecoin. And again, the people who made it said that they made it as a joke. So it's kind of hard to take some of those things seriously. But Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solara, and there's a few other, drawing a blank now because I'm trying to think, but there's a few tokens that I have that they're actually like XRP. They actually have real utility and can be used. Like XRP, for instance, is a mode of kind of, there's the SWIFT system that the bank has used forever. And that's basically transferring money between banks and between countries and between people. That is an old system that takes forever. XRP basically makes that much more efficient. You can do it in seconds versus days. So there actually is a real use for something like that in some of these cryptocurrencies. So basically, you got to do your research and make sure that you're investing in things that actually have a real use. If it's speculative, just know, you know, I mean, what was it? Dogecoin was close to $1. Now it's like, I don't even know what it is now. Less than 20 cents, 8 cents, who knows? So, got to do your research. Hopefully it answered the question. If that didn't, let me know.
No, Dennis, that was perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Did I say Ethereum? If I didn't say Ethereum, Ethereum is definitely on that list. But again, risk profiling, risk averse. So you can look these kind of same things. We can replace any of these words with traditional types of investments. Aggressive, like again, aggressive, ultra aggressive can be at the very top of that arrow, could be cryptocurrencies and other types of things that, for instance, you know, what beginning of the year, Bitcoin was over, let's say 40 or 50,000. It's less than half of that, or it got cut basically in half. So there's risk involved with some of these things. But then again, so did stocks. So emergency fund analysis. This is a funny picture that I remember from a long time ago. Emergency funds. You know, a lot of people will say, you know, they don't need emergency funds or they have enough saved. But again, all that I'll say with this particular screen is one of the things that I try to do before I do anything else, unless someone comes to me and says, hey, Dennis, I really want to get this kind of account open. I want to start with this. This can be just a starting point. We can work on other things later. Is emergency funds. Things happen in life. I can speak from personal experience like I already have. Like this lady says here, 5 years from now, I'll have conquered the whole world, but she's about to get hit in the head with a pot and her whole life is going to be different in a matter of seconds. So you just have to be prepared for the things that you cannot see. And when I go back to this spreadsheet right here built in, usually when I'm talking to clients or you know, friends, family, whoever about emergency funds, and they ask me that question, I typically will go directly to their expenses and just ask, how much do you spend on what does your lifestyle look like? So usually when I talk about expenses, I talk about your lifestyle. Like, what does it take for you to live the way that you want on a monthly basis? So right here, for instance, I put in $5,000, just typed it in just for example purposes. So it's pretty straightforward. Usually they base it off of 3 to 6 months. Well, obviously, if you spend $5,000 a month, you know, 3 months, 15,000, 6 months, 30,000. So again, it's not setting up an emergency fund is not complicated at all. Most people know how to do it. They just fail to do it. And again, that's the last thing you want to do is just fail to kind of, and again, if you don't have $15,000 sitting there ready to put in a dedicated emergency fund, you can save toward that like you can save toward everything else. It doesn't have to all be done at once. Okay, emergency fund. So again, what do you put your emergency funds in? We're talking about 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses. So of course you can leave it in cash. People, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say leave it in your house. But some people, I've heard of some people doing that. CDs and banks. There was the government. Geez, I'm drawing a blank now. Jasmine, jog my memory. The thing that we talked about last that you got. We talked
The
about
E-bond.
bonds. There we go. So the e-bonds, for instance, like that could be something that you put money in as an emergency fund. You know, it's through the government. It's very safe. Happen to pay a pretty good rate of interest. Kind of similar to a CD. So sweep accounts, basically just kind of accounts that sweep off excess and put it in a savings account, pays a little bit higher interest rate. Short-term debt, like you can use really, really short-term bond funds. Basically, like we're talking like a year or less in terms of maturity, because we know that if interest rates rise, it's not going to affect the price of the bond dramatically. So, you know, those can be acceptable places to put emergency funds. But, you know, regardless of where you put it, just, you know, you got to plan around that. Life insurance. Everyone loves.
Can we back up a second? So you said back. Can we go a slide back?
Yes.
So MF. So short-term debt MF, is that a mutual fund?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. You can buy individual bonds if you want. I typically use mutual funds or exchange traded funds that have a collection of bonds in them. Just so again, I want to diversify and make sure that I can choose a fund that has a high collective quality rating. And then I don't have to worry about if I needed the money for whatever reason, like if I needed the money next week, but my bond that I bought 6 months ago doesn't mature for another 6 months, then I have to sell it early, which can incur expenses. Now I have less money than I wanted. So that's why a mutual fund for emergency funds makes sense to me.
And we have in the chat from Jewel, she put, what is a CD?
Certificate of deposit. So they're kind of like a bond where a bond, like I said earlier, if I'm a company and I'm selling bonds, you can buy one of my bonds, you give me money, I pay you an interest rate and give your money back. And that over the end of that term, which could be a year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it may be. CDs act very similarly. Certificate of deposits, you basically are giving, but those are usually offered by banks. But essentially, you give a bank, X amount of dollars, and they pay you a fixed interest rate over that time period. Very, very. These are one of the pretty simple, straightforward investments that you could engage in. If that did not answer the question, please let me know.
Thanks, Dennis. And I just want to do a quick time check. We have about 12 minutes.
12 minutes. All right, let's get through it. Protection life planning. So we talk about the financial planning process. We talk about legacy, talk about protecting our family and those people who we could leave behind, not intentionally, but it happens sometimes. Income and expenses. Some people use a way to replace their income, or they look at their total expenses. Like, I have a mortgage, I have this amount of debt, I have college to pay for, these things. So they'll either go through and look at total expenses, or they'll go through and look at total income and determine how to, whichever one is greater, you're going to probably use that in combination with your current liabilities, combination with goals like, I want my son to have $1 million before, if I were to pass away, I want both my kids to have, okay, great. You can plan around that. You can get insurance that can provide that. So it says recommend, this is just an example. It says recommended product is term, but again, there's term, there's whole life, there's permanent insurance. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can approach life insurance. Life insurance can be a very complicated financial tool. So this is something you got to engage with somebody you trust. Our company actually doesn't sell insurance. My previous company did, but I actually work with a bunch of people, and I am licensed actually to talk about it. So, but I can, any questions with insurance products, I can help with that as well, or get you to somebody who can actually fill on that for you. Protection planning. Make sure you have medical insurance. You guys know about all these different things. If you own a business, Keyman Insurance is actually something that's pretty important. I have a lot of different stories about people who, like two partners own a business. One partner passes away. All of a sudden, the wife now becomes the old partner's new business partner. Never part of the plan. So having Keyman Insurance that you can hire somebody else if you are a business owner makes sense. Professional liability insurance. If you're renting your house out, you want to have the right kind of insurance to cover things if something were to happen either to the renter or to the property. So there's a lot of things that you can do to protect yourself outside of life insurance. So again, we kind of talked about a kind of a framework of identifying goals, analyzing. Time frame is very important. We really haven't talked about that much, but every single goal, so next time I meet with you, Jasmine, for instance, next time, one of the things we're going to talk about is whatever specific goal is on your mind, we're going to talk about the time in which you want to achieve that goal. Because if you gave me 20 years to achieve a goal versus 5, it's going to be a much different process. I'm going to use totally different investments. But time frame is a very big deal when it comes to the level of risk you need to take to achieve the goal. And of course, finally, identifying financial products, which, that's very important. And that's going to be based on everything we talked about already. Mustangs, risk return trade-off. We already talked about these different things. This is another look at that whole risk return continuum. We only have about 10 minutes left. And of course, I want to leave that open for, actually it's 9 minutes. We kind of want to talk about anything that's on anyone's mind, anything that we haven't covered. We can get a little bit more.
I have something to mention real quick.
Sure.
A lot of seniors, were talked into trading their whole life insurance plans for term insurance plans, which they did. But as they get older, then those term insurance plans dissolve and they're actually too old to get a whole life insurance too many places. So what do you recommend that seniors do?
So when you say, what do I recommend for seniors who have converted whole life into term already?
They've already converted their whole life into term. And I've seen situations where, they're 70, 80 years old and they can't their term insurance expires and they can't qualify for any other insurance. So they're just kind of left without anything, and they want something to at least be able to bury themselves, their relatives to bury them with.
Yeah. You know, I have people that I work with that we can have literally today I had the conversation about what my clients, a client that I have, wanting to make sure that all he literally said, all I want when I pass away is for my son to call you and call my estate planner, and everything will be taken care of as far as paying for the funeral, the burial, all that kind of thing. So we actually have an account that literally it's dedicated to expenses related to when he passes away, you know? So I mean, if you don't have the insurance to cover those different things, of course you could set up accounts that will be dedicated to, you can literally label those accounts. You can put it in your will. Like one of the thing I have on the screen right now, estate planning. We haven't touched on that, but outside of everyone I mentioned earlier, if you don't have a Roth, get one. If you can do it, because if you're retired, you can't do that, obviously. Unless you wanted to do some conversions, which we can talk about, that could work. But estate planning is essential. I've seen way too many search situations related to, like you said, getting insurance and converting term into, whole life into term, and be able to plan for the future. If you don't have your estate plan done, that's one thing I'll ask everyone to do. If you don't have an estate plan, please reach out to me. Please reach out to an estate planning attorney that you know and get that done as soon as possible, because it's a nightmare for the people who come behind you if it's not done right. And some of you probably have already realized or seen things like this happen. But for the estate planning piece, when it comes to insurance, if you've already converted whole life to term, some insurance companies allow you to extend that term at the end of it without having to do new health assessments or different questionnaires, and kind of something that would disqualify you from insurance purposes. So you got to make sure that you know what kind of insurance that you have. But so it's kind of depends on a case-by-case basis, because if you're saying, hey, I had whole life, I converted to term, I'm a healthy person, I'm 75, you might be able, because sometimes those the age requirements are pretty high on some of these policies, like Pacific Life or Lincoln, they'll allow you to do that. So it really is a case-by-case basis. And it's hard for me to answer that question without knowing the health, without knowing kind of the background of the person I'm dealing with. So I guess we can answer that question on in more detail if you wanted to at another time.
Thank you.
And I placed Dennis's email in the chat, and we have time for just one more question if anyone has another question. Oh, Kelly, if you have a will, do you still need to do estate planning?
Yes. Whenever it comes to estate planning, you should have a will, you should have a power of attorney, and you should have a health care directive at a minimum. So those three things: will, power of attorney, health care directive. And I can tell you why you would want to have each one of those, but we don't have that much time left. But just, those are things that would save you from a lot of complications, especially your family. So if you own business interests, or you have properties in this state, more than one, or in other states, then things like trusts. So trusts come into play when you want to avoid probate, and you want to, let's say, have a life insurance trust, like you were the question about having life insurance. Sometimes you can do what's called like a irrevocable life insurance trust, where the trust is funded by life insurance. So if I have that, the day I pass, the money in that trust account is now funded from a death benefit based off of me passing. And now that money can be used to pay for whatever. It can be used to pay for whatever, and then whatever's left in it can go to beneficiaries. So yeah, trusts are something that is not needed in every case, but it does make a difference.
And also in the chat from Jewel, we have, when is a good age to do estate planning?
Oof. I wouldn't necessarily based off of an age. I would say circumstance. If you have kids, you should do it. If you have assets that you want to protect and make sure the government doesn't get their hands on, because again, if you don't have estate plans in place, if you pass away, the money is going to go through the courts. It's going to go through the state. It's going to go through probate. And then it's going to take whoever is comes behind you as the owner of those, they have to go through the state to get them. And of course, there's lawyer fees, and basically whatever you had is going to be diminished because of processes that the state has in place. So I would say estate planning is something that you should base off of a circumstance. And I'll say everybody could probably benefit from it. No matter if you're an adult, I would say you could probably benefit from it. Some basic, doing a will is not, that doesn't take much of hardly any time at all.
You. All right, just 2 minutes left. Any last minute question?
So am I understanding that if you have estate planning, your kids can avoid probate? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Yep.
is there something called?
I'm sorry, what?
Is there something called an estate planner attorney or just an estate planner?
No, yeah, there's usually estate planners, we definitely want to deal with an estate planning attorney because they can help you come up with whatever strategies make sense, but they can also help put the actual legal documents in place to fill on that. So I have 4 estate planners that I work with around Washington. So I have one that is actually outside of Washington, but estate planners are very important. So I'm trying to think. And the original question was, I didn't. What was the first question part of it? Probate. That's what it was.
Yeah, about the estate planner.
So yeah, probate. Yeah. So if you have an estate plan in place, the only reason probate exists is if there isn't a defined instruction for how an estate should be distributed. Especially in Washington state, in any state really. So if you have plans, if you have a will, power of attorney, if you have someone who can speak on your behalf when you're gone, that's be the power of attorney. And of course, if you have a will, and then especially a trust, anything that goes into a trust has to go exactly where the trust is. Whatever's written in the trust has to go directly there because it's already set up in a correct legal format. So it doesn't kind of go. It doesn't have to go to the state first. It goes directly to whoever the beneficiaries are. So yeah, that's.
Well, thank you, Dennis. We are at our time. I have put Dennis's email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to him for guidance and support. We're hoping to have Dennis back next year, maybe sooner.
Yeah.
But yes, this was our final session of this financial planning series. But feel free to reach out to him. He has a lot of resources as well as can provide guidance on financial planning. So I thank all of you for joining us.